to Chef Live streaming. We are just joined by myself at the moment because Kaya is stuck in school traffic because school traffic is never good. I will I'll bring her in as soon as she has escaped the traffic jam that she's in at the moment. But I just wanted to start because we're a little bit late already, and I just wanted to sort of not quite troll the community, but sort of ruffle some feathers and say, I have some opinions about nerd attributes, and if you've got some other ones, I'd love to hear them. Um, as we found out with the AWS cookbook a few weeks ago, I have a bunch of opinions about what the AWS cookbook should look like. Turns out I don't know all the use cases, so that's really cool. And we had a really healthy chat there. So if you've got any information that I don't know, or any sort of use cases, like it's actually done, this doesn't work, or hey, have you thought about these other things that are really attributes are really good for? And I'd love to hear about this in the comments. But before I jump into my, I was going to say angry rant, but it's going to be a rant nonetheless. I'm going to do the pre-flight checks, which is firstly, if you are not following us on Twitter, we are at Chef on Twitter. We've got some really cool tweets going at the moment. We are less than a week away from ChefConf, and it's our 10th ChefConf, which is really nice. And speaking of ChefConf, if you're not if you're not joining us for ChefConf next week, I'm just going to ask why. It's free, and there's some really cool speakers. We've got people like HashiConf and Google and a bunch of other really good experts around the place. I think the Workday's on there as well, which is really nice. So if you want to know anything about Chef, and let's say you're deploying Chef with Terraform, for example, and you're doing it with the old style way, and you don't know how to migrate to the new Terraform way, then there's a demonstration and sort of backstory behind that, which is really cool. I'm just gonna, and speaking of Kaya, she has appeared magically in the background, although as per usual, Restream has called her Dan again, not me. No, so we go. Put it through as soon as that's the next thing. Bam, there we go.
Hey.
Oh, hey, how's it? I will click the right button in a second. How you doing?
It's been a morning. It's been a morning before the morning.
I was just doing our usual.
Yes.
Hey, it's Benny.
Hi, everybody.
Online. So I was just saying, like, if you haven't joined us for ChefConf, we've got some really cool talks. Just chef.ai/ChefConf. And if you want to know the agenda, at the end of that URL, just hit /agenda on that, and you'll get the full agenda for the 2 days. Which is really awesome.
Sweet. Be there.
Finally, if you have not joined us on the community Slack yet, again, why? And it'd be interesting to see if you haven't found this. If you found this, but you haven't found us in the community Slack yet, community-slack.chef.ai will put you at our community Slack. Will be in the. Let's see where I am. I'm probably in every single room you're in. If I'm not, you can always at me. I'm Damicus there. Yep. Kaya, what's your
I think I'm just Kaya. Hold on, let me double check. Yep, I am. Yep, just Kaya.
Cool.
Simple.
Nice. Yeah, so I was just going to, before I went into my checks, I was just saying I'm just going to basically try and ruffle some feathers in the community. Because lots of the community, I've been using node attributes for many years, and I've now been writing application cookbooks, which, in my not so humble opinion, if you've ever heard me talk about custom resources and that kind of stuff, I say never touch attributes. I'm going to demonstrate where I'm wrong today as well, because I've got some places. But if you're writing application cookbooks, I'm like, why using node attributes? No, because things like global stores and API interfaces. So where am I going to start?
Question. Well, let's talk about what node attributes are, and I guess node attributes and chef attributes are one and the same.
Yeah. So chef attributes are usually just called node attributes.
Okay, cool.
So let me just find my window. Just
Well-
see if we can share a tab. A second. I like how maybe share this tab with you here. So let's just jump back up to attributes. This is all off docs.chef.io/attributes at the minute. There are ways of setting data.
Mhm.
Just yeah, two big things on the minute. And I also have reminders that it's way too big for us to see. Apparently. So hopefully we can all read that now. I can definitely read my tiny window. There are ways of it's a way of saving, or sort of if you've got an attribute or a piece of information that you want to share between different parts of the system. Let's say I'll take the OHI attributes for example. They're a really nice, easy one. They're the ones that don't go away and you have no choice at. They are a global store of information that OHI, which is the system level interrogator, it'll go through and figure out what CPU architecture you've got, how much memory, how much RAM, that kind of stuff you've got, and which OS. There's a huge amount of information that OI gathers, and those are available under the system, like the OI attributes. So you can say, well, am I running system D? And it figures out and it will tell you basically if you're running system D, which is really nice. So you haven't got to go and figure out is there a file that's been set? Is there some weird stuff that's been set? No, you just leave that to OHI to figure out, and it'll tell you back there. So that's a program figures out how much RAM you've got, and you just trust that program's told you the right thing basically, and it saves it in a node attribute, which you then can read later on.
Mhm.
So the saving and reading is kind of it's a global state store really. So if I throw down to go to persistence and precedence is my favorite one to show, or my least favorite one to show, depending on if I'm being polite or not to node attributes. But they're really, really handy. So we've got default, force default, normal, and right. These are sort of different levels, and there's auto. No, I'm wrong now. I'm wrong again because I'm always wrong. There's 6 different levels, and you'll see that this chart in a minute, bit explained. Depending on where you set them and where you save this, you can override or you can take precedent of another piece of data. So you can say, let's say your roll cookbook, if you're still using roll cookbooks, you can set a default to Java version 6 if you want to, but then your program can come along and override that with Java version 8, Java version 9, Java version 10. Because by default, everyone gets Java version 6, and then it turns out actually, me locally, I want to go and run a native version, so you get to override this kind of thing. So that's really, really nice behavior if you understand how that all interacts, and this is why this table exists in the first place.
So, question about this.
Yeah, go for it.
So if you've got a default value,
yes,
and then as a node attribute, you put like normal, like as a key. Is that what the key would be?
Not quite. So I will spin around to that in a second. I'll give you an example of that in a second.
Okay.
It's easy to show in. I've got a tab literally next to this one that shows that.
Okay, but if you set something as a normal, then it would override any default value.
Exactly.
Okay.
And see, so the higher the number gets here, the more. So 2 overrides 1, 6 overrides 2, this kind of thing. So
okay.
And 15 cannot be overwritten, and you cannot. It's an automatic attribute. It is what it is. It's pretty good. It's really nice. You can just write, well, OHI is OHI, and it's the one that sets it. So it's in control of those. If you're relying on OHI attributes, you're relying on OHI attributes. You're relying on the system there.
Okay.
So let's say, and so the interesting thing is, if you've got a node.default, and you set it in an attribute file, which is what's bundled with cookbook, or you set it with a node recipe, they interact differently. So there's a default and an attributes file, and then if you write a recipe in the same cookbook, and then you say so in your recipe you write node.default, and you change that, it will then take the new value there. If you then do node.normal, which I will come to in a second, you should not use node.normal. Then that will override everything below the 7 minutes basically. So it's kind of the higher you get, it just keeps overriding things. So it's really interesting behavior. So if you're using an environment or a role, spoilers, roles are going away with policy files, or they're being sort of softly deprecated and kind of, we don't even need this anymore, it's fine. Which is really nice, because that means that this whole thing gets simplified, and again, actually these two go away when you start using normals. So node.normal as a reason why you shouldn't use node.normal, and I will go to that in a second. If I go over that now, I will go on to deep.com. So we'll come back.
Got you.
But that's basically it. So we've got this global store of information, which is really, really nice. It's a really, really nice way of saving information for other parts of your cookbook or other parts of other people's cookbook on the same node to read and write. And that's the key part here, is it's all on the same node. So if your node can be a docker machine and stuff, or a virtual machine, or a bit of hardware somewhere, it's on that single node. And those node attributes get pulled down with the cookbooks, and they're sort of compiled over time. I hope that makes sense. But if anyone's got any questions, Dan, what you've been talking about, just ping me in the chat, and I'll hopefully explain it even more in a second. So I think we've got, how many people we've got? We've got a person on one person on Twitch, one people on Twitch, and 2 on YouTube. So yeah, if anyone's got any questions on any of those, give us a shout. And so here we go actually. So default here, we are implicitly saying node.default. So we're saying node.default, so node attribute here. The default will be, this is how you set the Apache directory. I don't actually recommend this because this is not how I write my Apache code. It's fine, but not a problem. If you're doing it in an environments file, this is how you do it. I haven't done this. I've used roles and environments for probably a very long time, longer than I'd like to admit, because I'm actually that old, so it's fine. Probably getting on for 7 years, but node.normal. Here's the tricky one. So node.normal looks normal, nothing fun with it, except node.normal persists its state. So if you remove your cookbook, it stays in the node data. So you can see, if you have to have a base cookbook and it sets node.normal, and you didn't need to do that, you get a bit of a tricky space. So you get node.normal, and there's a ways of overrides later on. But node.normal persists even if you remove the cookbook. It stays on the node forever until later on. That can be a bit of a problem. Hello phone. Hello Tesco's. Oh, also Tesco's are talking. And I'll talk today. So actually they just pinged my phone, so it wasn't the people that were talking, but yeah, they're doing a talking chef conference, which is nice. So yeah, it gets a bit tricky when you're saving your global store to your node, and then you can never remove it. So I'd recommend if you're thinking about using node.normal, don't do that. Just use node.default. So scroll back up here to our lovely table. I would just use default. If you can avoid, let's try not to smash my keyboard again, so please. I would use default, and I would probably use overrides. Those are the two levels I've always used, not needed to use anything else. So you've got all these levels here. So the 15, you can kind of discount from this chart really. Those are O-high things. You don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So it's fine. Force override. I've never needed force override for a very long time, and I think it defaults default. So default,
Okay.
I would ship with like a base cookbook or a cookbook that you want everyone else to read. Here are some really sensible defaults, and that makes sense grammatically. It's like, hey, here's your default. If you want to override it, then you would use the override there. There are ways of like where you set them as well changes. So roles override environments because roles tend to be more specific than environments, hence why they're higher. So let's say you have an environment called production and an environment called test. The test environment may have like, let's say like, you may need to be rolling the version of Java 8. So let's say Java version 6 is in production, but test is version 7.
Mm-hmm.
In the environment files, you would change that up there, and you would roll that through slowly there. When you're overriding it, if you want to test it out in the environment, you would just override that. That's fine. So that's how you do that. So that's because of environment levels. And let's say actually your front end and your back end roles. So you have a role for your front end web servers and a role for your back end servers. They may have a specific version of Java, and one of them doesn't want to use the default version. You can say override it as well. So it kind of gives you enough flexibility. And this chart here that I'm waving at with my arm, this is really nice. It gives you a nice amount of flexibility. But with all flexibility, with flexibility comes a cost. Let me just show you. And today I've been talking about Java quite a lot because this might hurt you a little bit. So where are we? Java default. So this is a version of the Java cookbook from. Actually, when was this from? This was from 2019. We don't use this method anymore. So here we go. This is our notebook default level. Download path, JDK version. This all looks fine. So we ship this with the cookbook. So how you change the JDK version is you set it in your cookbook as an override or a default or whatever, and it will take precedence over what we've shipped as a cookbook. So here's a bunch of really nice defaults. Override the way you can. That's fine. The problems. I'll come back to my constraints in a second. Testable. Yeah, testable is probably a nice area for this one. In fact, here we go. So we've got Node platform family. We've got Windows, Mac OS. In fact, it's Mac OS X here. This is how old this one is. And the install flavor. So the install flavor changes, and then this one here changes. So depending on which platform we are, we do a different thing, or we set different attributes. Usually in programming, you want to test this and say, hey, I'm on the Windows platform. If I'm on the Windows platform, am I setting the right thing? So if I go to the Apache 2 tests, actually, it's probably good. I'm going to unshare this a second and reshare my whole break screen. Because I'm going to darting backwards and forwards. So here's Apache 2, and we've got a library here that does based on the platform family, we set that, and then we can go and test this. Default types configured. Any of these that change platforms. So if I jump over to spec, so library we're testing. So we go to libraries and the Linux editor. So fine, and then we do some setup here. But the important thing is, if I'm on, Give me a second. Turns out everyone else has an doorbell. So I'm going to let you stare. Actually, it'll be okay. Bear with me 2 seconds. Posty has the best timing as well. Predium, I will answer that awesome question in a second about policy files. So if I'm a Red Hat, then I expect libxit to do that. So we don't have a nice way of testing that with attributes. So if you jump back here into attributes and find the attributes, we don't have a nice way of saying this should be this, or this value should be this, or it should be blank. We just kind of expect it to be blank. There are other ways of testing it, but if you want to just do a really fast spec test, then really using libraries for your defaults is a really nice way of doing it. The other thing with libraries is they help you write an API contract. So if you're not sure how to explain this well, so I'm probably going to explain this back and then come back to this at some point. It's all about your API boundaries. So here we're providing a library cookbook, and we've got some resources where we say, hey, tell us which version you want, we can figure the rest out. Well, that's kind of goes along with promise theory, where you tell a program to go, tell a thing to go do something, you trust it to go out and do it. You don't interrogate it in the middle, you don't get into the deep dark bowels of the program. You just say, right, just go off and fetch me coffee, and you expect the coffee to come back. That's really what the rest of you can do. With this, we're able to sort of jump right in the middle of the cookbook and change things on the fly, because there is no real API boundary. And the other thing about a nice API boundary, as I alluded to earlier on, is we can do type constraints. It's something we cannot get rid of. Where are we? Where are we? Come on. Actually, I'll go back up, because I'll come back to good stuff in a second. So let's if I go into my resources here, I go to my config resource. When I'm using a resource, a normal resource in Chef, you expect to say, let's say you're using template resource. You expect the name, the file name is a string, so you expect a string there. And much like the root group here, we expect a string. If we were pulling in node attributes there, we couldn't determine whether it's a string or not until way too late. In fact, often what we've seen in the past is there's a root group might not be set as a property. We would see it as a node attribute, which would be right down the bottom here, and it would just interact with the resource directly. And that's not really nice, because it's then got 2 entry points to test, and you're like, what's even happening? And then it's also 2 different places to configure it as well. So that's always nice, where you've got a single place to change it, you've got a single place to expect to test it as well. And then it just makes it easier for everybody involved. So if you're really clear and concise from the outset, then you make your life a little bit easier. So it's testable, we've got a testable, oh yes, global stores. I think we've almost come to the end of my rant a second. Oh, when would I recommend, if you're using node attributes, to actually use them? So I come out here. Never use them in library cookbooks. Just don't, unless you're wanting to change this. This isn't a really library cookbook. This is like we're changing a recipe, so actually we're still changing things. So in Test Kitchen, I can set an attribute like this. So attributes, the version attribute to 10. What that does is, I've been lazy. I could have been even nicer. The version is, we pull that in from the Test Kitchen YAML is where it's going to go, and the variant there. So and that then sets those 2 things, which is really nice. What this means is we haven't going to write this recipe 14 times. We just change this version here. So if we check OpenJDK 10, we do 10, 11, and 12 there, and that's a really nice way of changing a number really simply. Tuning it on the fly, as it were. So I've just got an OpenJDK recipe there, and then we sort of reuse that recipe, which is pretty sweet. That's a resource way of doing things, but that's one kind of way. If anyone's got any other ways of saying, actually, I really like using the node attributes in that next. Right, so enough with that and that. And finally, before I get to the policy file stuff, which is super cool, there is a chef cop. So if we go to chef web docs, chef, so here, get it. Cool. And if we go to Cookstyle, here's one of the cops list. I've done this. So if we enter all Cookstyle cops, and then I go to merge and normal. Here we go. So Cookstyle will help you correct this kind of stuff, but give that name. So Node normal does weird stuff, and this will go through a bit more explanation. I could read it verbatim, but definitely going to read this if you're using Node normal and you haven't run Cookstyle on your repository yet. There's some funky stuff for historical reasons why Node normal exists, but yeah, don't use that stuff. Right, we've got a really cool question here from William. I'm using a policy file, so is there any docs which can help me know the precedence level from the policy file is used? I think it's just a someone can probably correct me on it. I think it's just a smaller version of this. I think it's a slimmed down version of this. If I'm incorrect, which I'm going to double check today, but let me just see if you're in the Chef community Slack. Cool. Brilliant. If you jump into the Chef community Slack, we'll be able to follow up on this one later on. I will double check this one, but I'm pretty sure the answer is it's a slimmed down version of this. So we don't use environments and norms because they don't exist in the policy file way of doing things. They just, I think it's a node attribute now. I can't remember. So policy files are on my list of things I need to properly know end to end. I don't yet, so I can't answer this question as well as I'd like to answer this, which is a bit of a shame. But I think it's a smaller list of this kind of stuff here. Yeah, it's on here. It's on. It's my policy file. So no, they're not on at the moment. I think that part box is in the works, getting better, which is a bit of a shame. It's a bad answer for you, so I apologise for that one. However, jump on the community Slack and jump in the general channel and re-ask that question, because it's a really good question and hopefully should prompt us to go and do some documentation, which is nice. Does anyone else have any questions about when you probably should use node attributes? And I'm completely ignoring them because.
So, okay. So from what I gathered, you use node attributes. So, in this case, let me know where I'm wrong. Okay. You use node attributes to determine the current state of a node, to see what the previous state was.
Kind of, but not really.
Okay. And then to figure out what the state is going to be when the client runs?
No. So that is part of the node. So that is part of the node object, all of those kind of things. So there's the node object itself, which is it stores all of that information. But there's also the node attributes, which are which are this on this list that is going through there, which are just it's a nice key value store as it were. So just a place just to hit save, hit save, and then you can re-reference that stuff later on.
Okay.
So if you think about like a variable on steroids, a variable that you can set at different levels.
Mm-hmm.
So you get some discounts. Always a little bit easier.
So, okay. So we can define attributes, and so you can define attributes in those cookbooks. And where else? Can you do it in, you said recipes as well?
Yeah. So actually, the Java cookbook is a good example of that. So we're setting them. Always my go-to cookbook. Just bring it back up. So in the old version, so 4.3. Oh, what? We shipped a bunch of recipes with the cookbook.
Okay.
So we've got attributes here. So these are attributes default. These are like the lowest levels. It's like super basic. You can always override these. So
okay.
This
okay.
is
Yep.
So this one here. Go back a second. Scroll. Scroll back. So if we use default in an attribute file, which is this one here. So I'm in an attribute. I'm in the attribute folder, and then any Ruby file in here is an attribute file. So you set all these are like the lowest level, like super basic defaults. You can always override them with anything else. Every other level is more important than this level. So if you set a default in a recipe, then they would override this. So if I go into Java recipes, adopt .jdk, and we then set some more node attributes. Also, my face is probably taking a bit of a picture here. I'm not a fan of this because it's also hard to read, which is a bit of a shame. So the Java home is set. But basically, if you set a node attribute in this file here, it would be more important than the previous version. So let me just, I'll go back to my attributes. Yeah, so we'll go back to my attributes a second. Go by default. Let's say I set version 8 here, and then in this file instead, so the recipes .jdk, I set the version to 9. It would be 9. That would be 9. And you can kind of see where this is really powerful, but at the same time really, really confusing. So lots of companies in the past have done, well, lots of organizations in the past have really liked using as many attribute levels as possible. I'm a big fan of staying away, and I pretty much wherever we like to use the fewest number of levels as possible.
Okay. So I guess the next question.
I think we've got a question from Prem again, which is great. Although we'll come back to your question in a second, because I expect it's going to be equally grueling for my brain. So definitely it is. Let me just can we use conditionals for setting up the attributes of the node depending on the node platform? Yes, hopefully I've got one in. Where are we? Yes, is the answer. I know this because I just saw it a minute ago. I've also done this in the past. Where are we? So scrolling. It's half a second because let's leave it back. So if we use a case here to say which platform family we're on. Also, by the way, this is an automatic attribute, so this is set by OHI, and we're reading the node attribute here. So if you see node and then open square brackets, that's the read way of reading it. If you see a default, normal, override, false override, those kind of things. If you see a level before it, that's setting. So set as it goes. And this is the key for the thing. So we're reading the node platform family here from that attribute, and then if that comes out of Windows, Mac OS X, it sets different things there. So yeah, we can do that there. If you're in policy files, you can't do that within a policy file RB, I don't think. Someone is probably going to correct me on this, but I wouldn't ever put that in there. I wouldn't put that logic in policy file anyway. I would leave that to a recipe, because then you can do some really interesting things in recipes and then actually test those. Wouldn't want to do that in a policy file. You want to leave that. Whilst you can do lots of really interesting logic in policy files, and they are just Ruby files, so you can just write Ruby in them. I would avoid where possible too much logic and too much confusing stuff.
Okay. So then,
you had a question.
Well, my question is simple. Well, maybe it's simple, but tell us why you don't recommend node attributes and why you don't like them.
So we're twofold. So I write lots of custom resources. Mm-hmm. I really like a standard. This file is a really good example. This file in Java is a very good example. It's huge.
Yeah. It's
unwieldy. It's untestable. It just keeps going. But this is a great example. If you're doing this and then it kind of blah blah blah. Like this file might have actually been the reason why I've got such a hatred of no attributes. And it's in a few library cookbooks. And so library cookbooks are the thing I write the most. Rather than roles and environment cookbooks. Roles and environments are exactly where you should be using attributes, by the way. So they're perfect for that kind of stuff. And then you can see this just goes on and on. And actually, how do I? It's not got a nice interface. How do I set up the URL for this thing? That's not. You've then got to piece things together. You've actually also got to look in this file for what it is. It's not easy to document either. So a couple of things there. So the user interface for this looks pretty awful from this particular use case itself, because generally no attributes are fine to use. But this is a horrible user interface, so I don't particularly like it. It's not testable. And if you're writing custom resources and you want to use this, then they just kind of end up not. They sort of interact really weirdly with the custom resources, and then they have a way of just being global. Because they're global state stores, you can set them and get them from wherever you like. So you can set them from cookbook A and cookbook B, but not where it's been set as well. Or who's force overriding me? Well, I don't know. Did someone set a weird thing? Did someone in the base cookbook choose a level that I can't override? Not my business. That's probably my most hatred. At this file, I mean, this is just a wall of text at this point. It's not nice to read. It's probably where I go. And then placeholders for adopt OpenJDK when it gets released. And this is the thing. We have placeholders for next thing. So instead, let's go there. Hey, this file doesn't exist anymore, so that's fine. Instead, we've got these as internal things, so internal hashes. So the default adopt OpenJDK URL. These are just defaults. They can always be overwritten by setting them by the user. In fact, these probably need to be changed at some point soon because it's probably out of date. So we like to provide nice, sensible defaults. the sensible defaults do go out of fashion Twitch after a while. There we go. So some actually, I'm not sure if 8 is actually end of life now. I'm hoping so. And then here's our objectives as well. So people who are using this book don't really need to get. Oh, interesting. Audio is terrible. I wonder why the audio is terrible. It's
I
still
think
terrible.
it's fine.
Interesting. That's really weird. Don't know what's going on. Olmec, is it also bad on Twitch? Twitch.tv/chef software. I wonder if it's bad there.
I wonder because I can hear you just fine.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So yeah, you end up with. So this is all internal implementation logic. How you end up using this stuff is much. I'm just gonna hit the documentation for a second. There you go. Like, how do I use this? Well, I've got a version of the variants, and I've got my terrible typing here for some reason. And like these are all easily documentable. And you notice here we've got true, false, okay, Boolean, Boolean things there. So we can set Booleans. They are types of custom resources. You can have types. So any really kind of type or object, you can build your own object and pass on it. With an attribute, you cannot say just pass me numbers, integers, whatever, floats. I only accept floats. Anything else but a float, I don't care about. And you can't give nice errors back. But this is like one very specific use case. Is why I'm so pent up about it. Probably because like this use case is like my biggest use case.
Got you.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is a variable file.
But you can see on that one attribute file there, you can see why I'm like, let's stop doing this. This is not. No one likes this. This is not a pleasant experience to do. And that's really like the chef way, or the thing we like to say a lot is like, make it delightful. Like, this isn't delightful. This is not a delightful thing to do or use. Like there are better ways, there are more delightful ways of using the product. Just some of those things are not no attributes. Sometimes they are no attributes, but I would argue that most of the time, when I come across them, no attributes can get really confusing. But they're like, I guess, not remediation strategies, but like there are ways of like not shooting yourself in the foot whilst wielding this like 15 level attribute array thing. So I think we're gonna leave it there. I think we've got like another 5 minutes in the stream before we need to go shoot and go to our next engagement, which is cool. Does anyone else have any questions apart from points about the audio was terrible today, which is a super shame.
Yeah, I'm sorry if that's the case. Like, I think we need to research that. I mean, I wonder if it's just like a single or individual issue, or every time I watch our videos, you can hear them.
Don't open YouTube up when you go to Chef. Let's see. I can hear myself now. It's going to freak me out. That's really weird. It seems clear. I mean, I'm fuzzy because my upper bandwidth is terrible apparently.
Yeah.
No? But thank you anyway. Thanks for joining us, and also thanks for getting in touch as well. Brilliant. That was really nice stuff there. If you got any more questions, comments, or just want to tell me I'm wrong, I'm always happy to be wrong. I've got very used. I was quite careful to be not completely dismiss no attributes at the park today, because there are some use cases for it. But but if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you've just got no attributes, everything needs no attributes. It's not. It might not be the case.
roles though. Roles you use node attributes.
Yeah, you can use node attributes in roles and environments. There's a really places to do that.
Okay.
Or the other things use it. You can have role
Gotcha.
cookbooks as well. So role cookbooks are where you'll create a role, which might contain other cookbooks underneath it. So you had a web server role, and it would include the Java cookbook and a cookbook and a cookbook. That would be your web server role. If you're doing the what's called the workshop way. But there are some newer patterns which I hope to share in the next couple of months, which is the effortless pattern. That's a really nice stuff there. And I think there's some more patterns kicking around that I came to touch with, so we're going to go do some more research on that, which is pretty sweet. And I'll find out where I'm wrong about his node attributes, because I'm definitely going to be wrong at some point. But until next time. So actually, we're not streaming next week, which is cool.
We're not
That's
streaming.
cool.
Well,
it's a shame. We're doing our
are we doing the
coffee,
coffee thing?
We're doing the
Yeah.
coffee. We're both. Actually, let me just go and bring the agenda up. Bring the agenda. I'll just share my screen again because who doesn't want to see the agenda for next week? So on Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. my time, we are doing a coffee morning, which is really cool. And then I think we're doing it Tuesday, Wednesday, doing it Thursday. We're not doing it Thursday because we've got our kickoff hackathon at 10 a.m. And it's also stay tuned for that. The hackathon kickoff there. You want to hear that? There's some, it's really good. I'm actually really stoked for that one because I've heard the
prizes.
Yeah, the prizes are cool. The prizes are cool.
One thing I'm a little
sorry, go on.
I was gonna say this is like as an aside. One thing I'm a little curious about is how or what types of products or projects people are going to come up with for DevOps hackathon. I've never been a part of a DevOps hackathon before ever. So
should be really, really interesting. I'm stoked to see what could come out. Yeah, we'll be on for half an hour for coffee every morning of Chef Conf next week. So instead of doing our streams, I believe will be on Zoom, which will be really, really cool. So you can always come and join us there. I will be drinking copious amounts of coffee because it's 8:30 in the morning. I'll probably just woken up because I have a small child. Actually, no, I'll either be awake for like 20 minutes or 2 hours. One of the two, depending on how you feel. Has she slept in this morning? Sorry, what's going on? Done. Yeah, I'll take this. It's fine. So yeah, join us next week where we'll be talking all things Chef Golf. And we'll just jump off. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye.
All right, thanks for joining us.